Hey y'all, it's me Tiffany and welcome back to my channel. If this is the first time you're here, I mostly do books, manga, graphic novels, occasionally a television show or movie, just a little less frequently. So I decided I'm gonna make this a review on 4 very short, I guess they're considered more essays. Like they're short, the other one is an audio book. So this actually comes from a collection of a bunch of short books. And it's basically to show more diverse stories or topics. So sometimes they're more like personal stories, sometimes they're about activism. Either way, they're all nonfiction. I recently found out about the little series, and my library has like 6 or 7 of them. There's 10 according to the Penguin House random website. So if you're interested in this is definitely targeted more towards teens, and none of them hit like 100 pages from what I can tell. So if you're looking for a super in-depth conversation about one topic, this may not be it, but whether it's introductory or just like Leo Baker, who is an athlete, if you just want a little bit more of that person or just a light intro to a topic, this might be for you. The ones that are here on the website at the time of me recording this, because they obviously can come out with more later: The Black Internet Effect, Food-Related Stories, Skate for Your Life, Continuum, Concrete Kids, Taking on the Plastics Crisis, The New Queer Conscious, Imaginary Borders, Beyond the Gender Binary, and This Is What I Know About Art. All right, so like I said, I read 4. I don't know if the ones that I didn't read have anybody who's in the LGBTQIA plus community, but the 4 I read did. You know, if you don't know who Leo Baker is, you possibly don't know that they're a trans masculine person, because this one doesn't advertise too much. Well, it does say non-binary athlete on here. I didn't notice that. But either way, like the other 3 did. I don't know the authors of the other ones, so I can't tell you on that. But if you're interested, you know, they're all on the Penguin House website. They have audiobooks, whatever. So let me talk about the 4 I read. I'm going to do this in the order I read them. So Continuum, I read this one first. I actually picked this one up because I was kind of looking for, like, when I go to the library, sometimes I pick up more books than I'm going to read, just because if I don't like something, I can just kind of go on to the next thing. And yeah, I do have audiobooks, stuff like that, but sometimes I want like physical reads, sometimes I want audiobooks, you know, that kind of thing. And I was trying to get out of a reading slump, so I was like, maybe I could try this. It looks interesting, it looks small. So according to this, it says, in Continuum, artist, activist, and actor Chela Mann shares his experiences within the deaf, transgender, genderqueer, Jewish, and Chinese identities, and talks about his self-journey to self-acceptance. Above all, he shows us that identity lies just on the continuum, a beautiful, messy, ever-evolving road of exploration. I really like this, and this is what got me to read some of the other ones. He does talk about what it's like to be deaf, what it's like to be transgender, things like that. But instead of it being like what we need to do and how all this stuff, he just shows us a glimpse into his journey to get to the point where he's at. And there is a lot to learn about it. And I found it really fascinating. Obviously, I know there are Jewish people in the community, but I haven't personally ran into a lot of stories about Jews in the community, and I haven't read anything that was written by a deaf person. And I think it's interesting that when he became deaf, he had hearing initially, then became deaf. The only other book I read with deaf characters, or, you know, there's a couple of deaf superheroes, but I guess the Helen Keller book, and I guess she did write it, so I lied. But, you know, this is first modern day, and it's interesting to see, like, I've never thought about potentially how the deaf community may treat people who originally had hearing versus not had hearing. And it's not even just them, it's just like society as a whole, how they treat people who possibly used to hear, because stereotypically, a lot of people who are born deaf have a particular accent, things like that. And I guess if you've had hearing most of your life, that accent may not be there. So that was an interesting conversation. And it was interesting talking about like being biracial with the Chinese and Jewish, and then like religiously, and just coming into his own. So I love that it starts off with, if I had been born during any other era, my story would be different. The world would not be ready to understand with open hearts or minds. To this day, many still choose not to, but whether they choose ignorance or empathy is up to them. My story will still be there and it'll never be erased. So I do like, because some people want to act like there's no issues now modern day, because it is better than it used to be in a lot of aspects, but there's still a lot of people who haven't shifted mindsets yet, and things aren't where they need to be. Just because it's better, things aren't where they need to be. And it's interesting because, you know, some people have a lot more pain than others, some people dissociate, all this stuff. So it's just because you read one story with a particular perspective, sometimes it's nice to read others to see how they handle things, because everybody is so different. And I like that he mentioned so many different communities and aspects to his identity, instead of just making the book about just one of the many, many identities, because all these things shape a person. So I really, really enjoyed this. Okay, so the next one I read was Beyond the Gender Binary. Unfortunately, I did not like this one as much, but hey, sometimes that happens. I'm glad I still read it, because I haven't read much of anything that has to do with non-binary or that aspect of the LGBT community. So, all right, what I did enjoy is I like that it's sort of a short introduction to a lot of ideas. If you haven't read much within this sector of the community, I like the fact that you can get an idea of how a perspective could be. But I think the conversation, because like, and I'm not trying to compare, but I'm just going to, right? So I'm going to hold up the three that I have. All right, so I'm just going to say these two are more about like personal stories. This one's more about an SAS. They talk about their life, but it seems like it's trying to open more of a conversation of things we need to do and things like that. And the fourth one I read is similar, but this one seems like it opened up so many conversations that you just can't have in such a short book. So that was my biggest issue with it, because, you know, and I think these conversations would be interesting if they were just open a lot more. But at the same time, I am glad that we are starting to get doors opened in the publishing houses for more stories like this. So maybe whether it's them or somebody else can go into a nonfiction that just goes into heavy depth of all these topics that are trying to be presented here. I think it was just trying to do too large of a task. So one thing though, I didn't really care for, and I'm not going to pretend I'm an absolute expert of the community. Even being in the community, there's so much I don't know when it comes to LGBTQIA+, because there's a lot of identities just in this one community. Some people can be in multiple identities. I don't know every aspect of all the history, because, you know, whether it's just gay or trans, whichever, they've been found in like every country of the world, like every tribe. There's so many complicated histories, because depending on where you are, how things were handled, and, you know, just that, right? But there was a section in this that I didn't like, and I understand where it comes from. And it talks about, I think it said like before the 17th century, this is where the recent idea of sex comes, and like the gender roles. And, you know, and I don't know if I just read this wrong. I could have honestly have read this wrong, but the way I read it, that being just a snippet and not go into deeper, it kind of puts in like a weird thing to me. I don't know how I want to describe it. And I saw some complaints on Goodreads that some women didn't like the way they were talking about some issues. I personally didn't have any issues with that. I didn't see it the same way, but everybody does read differently. Maybe because it's so short, some stuff are not being read in the intention of the author. I'm not fully sure, but that's my piece on that. So the Queer Conscious, I listened to this audiobook because my library didn't have it and it was cheap on Audible. So I like this a lot. I haven't read a lot of gay male books. I mean, like especially nonfiction, I usually side with more female authors in general. It's not intentional. I don't go like I'm avoiding these people. It's just how things have happened. And there was a little part in it that made me chuckle because he was talking about being in love with like his straight best friend, and I was like, well, damn, everybody goes through that, huh? And it's it makes sense, right? Like if it happens to girls, it can obviously happen to guys. I just never thought about it happening, and just hearing that just made me chuckle a little bit, just one of those things. And a lot of it was more manifesto, I suppose, with his like commandments of how to basically be an ally even within the community. And something that I like that he talked about, and I do think some of this stuff could be dabbled in more, but something I liked a little bit more about his is he kept the context more simplified and easier to get through in such a short text that like a beginner into this would be able to understand completely, and it's not trying to open such a wider conversation of what's happening. So one thing I do like is he talks about gatekeeping within the LGBTQIA plus community. This is a real thing that happens, and there are straight people who, especially like with bisexuals, pansexuals, asexuals, denying their existence. But there's also people within the community that think that way. Some people have thought, because I'm out, everybody should be out. And if you're out and you don't want to date somebody who's out, I do think you have the right for that. If you don't want to have to hide yourself from anybody, I think that's fair. But shaming somebody and trying to force them to come out before they're ready is never okay. And just be kind and know not everybody's in a safe position to come out. Or maybe some people just come out to their family, but not work and everywhere else, and even if today is better than it was 20 years ago, not everybody's families have evolved. Not every country has gotten better. Not even every state or city has gotten better. And, and even if it looks better because the laws are less strict or maybe people are less violent, don't mean there's still not prejudice in those locations. So it's not for us to judge when somebody else should be coming out. And if somebody's willing to be kind to us, or we suspect somebody's closeted, we just be kind, no pressure. And I really love this conversation that we just don't know what somebody's going through, and we need to let them make the decision that is safest for them. And there are some other great points in this book, but that was my favorite because, yeah, we preach that, but a lot of people still don't get it. And, to be honest, like, it can even be people who are older, who didn't grow up in this time, who had things be more dangerous, that are still not willing to come out because maybe they had to force themselves with marriage and kids or what have you, and they think their life's going to fall apart, or maybe this, that, and that. We just don't know. So be kind. So the last one I read was Leo Baker. They are a trans masculine person. I knew that they were a skateboarder, but I didn't know much else. And this was more about Leo's journey into like basically acceptance and like, oh, are you a tomboy? Oh, you're this. And then like changing to wear more masculine clothes in the bathroom, and how like even in the skateboarding community, which you would think, oh, this is for outcasts, this is for this and that and that. There's still some prejudice there. There's still other things there. There's still expected for people who were born as a female to act a certain way. And I think this was such an interesting concept. And it was interesting to hear this particular aspect because, well, I mean, I don't personally read a lot of athletic stuff, but when you think of skateboarders, you would think they would be more accepting. You would think they'd be more a lot of things, and they're not. And it was interesting to talk about like how the grandmother was more conservative, but the mom was a little bit more accepting. And Leo's mom had addiction issues, and while there are addicts who do horrible things, there's a lot of addicts who just had a rough go and make some bad decisions, but inherently aren't horrible people. And I like that when talking about Leo's mother, Leo basically tried to be compassionate, and it went through. You can tell there's love, and you know, there's no shaming, and I appreciate that. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed all that. If you want to read any of these, I do definitely recommend it, even though I might have some critiques. That does not mean they're not good, and they're not great additions to add, especially if you're new to just knowledge, or maybe a new member into the community, because you know, allies still need some knowledge too. People in the community always can learn more, especially because there's so many different identities. And I am thankful that they're these short books. They are definitely more targeted towards teens, I think, but I think that's fine. That makes them, sometimes that makes them a little easier to digest. And yeah, so I will see you later. If there's anything you want to see me talk about, or we can have a discussion, I would love that. And I'll see you later. Bye.